It was August 14th, 2016, a quiet Sunday evening in Houston, Texas. Families were inside their homes, eating dinner, watching television, and enjoying their routines. No one in that neighborhood could have imagined that within moments, the calm of their evening would be shattered by something that sounded like it came straight out of a disaster movie. High above the rooftops, a small aircraft was in trouble. At the controls was 63-year-old Gary Bennett, an experienced pilot who had been flying since 1972. Gary wasn't a rookie. He had logged more than 5,000 hours of flight time and even held a commercial license. Flying was his life, his passion, and his identity. But on that evening, all of his years of experience could not stop what was about to happen. Gary was piloting a 1960 Taylorcraft model, BL-65. He had taken off from Angleton Regional Airport and was heading toward Victoria Regional Airport. At first, everything seemed routine, but partway through the flight, the engine began to sputter. Pilots are trained to recognize even the smallest irregularities, and Gary immediately sensed the danger. The sputtering grew worse, and then, in one devastating instant, the engine cut out completely. The plane had lost power. Silence filled the cockpit, except for the sound of wind rushing against the aircraft. Gary's heart raced, but he knew this was no time to panic. He needed to find a place to land, and he needed to find it fast. Below him was a dense residential neighborhood. Trees, power lines, homes, and cars stretched in every direction. It was the worst possible place for an engine failure. Gary scanned desperately for a landing spot and finally saw what looked like an open field. For a moment, hope sparked inside him. He banked toward it, but as he drew closer, he realized it wasn't safe at all. A forest blocked one side and a road bordered the other. Any attempt to land there could end in disaster, either crashing into the trees or colliding with cars. Time was running out, altitude was dropping, and Gary had no choice. If he didn't act immediately, he would die. His only option was to aim for a backyard. On the ground below, homeowners had no idea that a plane was silently descending toward them. A family sat eating dinner, completely unaware of the danger overhead. Then it happened. A deafening boom shattered the evening as Gary's plane slammed into a backyard. The fragile frame of the aircraft crumpled on impact, and in an instant, flames erupted. The spilled fuel ignited, the battery exploded, and the wreck became a raging fireball. Inside the nearby house, the family froze. Through their windows, they saw fire in their backyard. At first, they thought it might be fireworks or some kind of accident. Then reality set in. A plane had crashed right outside their home. Inside the burning wreckage, Gary was still alive. His body was badly burned, his clothes engulfed in flames, but sheer survival instinct took over. With unbelievable strength, he unbuckled his harness, forced open the mangled door, and crawled out of the inferno. Every step was agony. Flames licked at his skin, his body covered in smoke and ash. Still, he pushed himself forward, stumbling toward the house, the only chance of survival within reach. He began pounding on the back door, screaming for help. The family inside had no idea what to think. They heard banging, frantic shouting, but couldn't understand what was happening. When they finally opened the door, they were struck with shock. Standing before them was a man covered in smoke and soot, his skin blistered, his clothes burned away. His voice was raw as he begged for water, crying out, "My wings are on fire. Please, I need water." For a moment, the homeowners didn't know whether to help or to run. Shannon, the woman who opened the door, later admitted that her first thought was that he was some kind of arsonist covered in gasoline, ready to set them on fire. But then she realized this man wasn't a threat, he was dying. She immediately grabbed cups of water and began handing them to Gary. He tore off his jacket, poured the water over his burning body, and tried desperately to cool his blistering skin. Her husband Kevin, meanwhile, grabbed the phone and called 911, his voice frantic as he reported the situation. "There's been a crash. There's a plane in our backyard. The pilot is alive, but he's on fire. Please hurry." Across the neighborhood, other residents had heard the explosion. One man named Jerry Everhart had been eating dinner when he heard the loud boom. He rushed outside and saw flames lighting up the sky. Like many others, he too dialed 911. Firefighters raced to the scene, immediately battling the inferno, but they didn't notice at first the figure stumbling away from the wreckage toward a stranger at his back door. That figure was Gary, clinging desperately to life. Inside the house, the scene was surreal. Shannon later described it in vivid detail. She said, "His whole left arm was on fire. He was stomping his feet, trying to beat it out. He sat down, tried to take off his boots, his pants. He was screaming, 'Help me, please help me.' I'll never forget his eyes." Despite the fear and shock, Shannon refused to leave him. She kept bringing him water, urging him to put his hands under cold water. Gary, his body severely burned, poured water over himself and tried to ease the unbearable pain. Finally, paramedics arrived. They rushed Gary into an ambulance and sped him to the hospital. His condition was critical. Doctors discovered that 75% of his body was covered in second-degree burns. The survival rate for burns that severe is very low, but Gary was determined. He endured weeks in the hospital, multiple surgeries, and endless pain. Somehow, against all odds, he survived. Later, Gary's sister Lisa reached out to Kevin and Shannon to thank them. She said, "If they hadn't acted so quickly, if they hadn't given him water, if they hadn't called for help, my brother wouldn't be here today. They saved his life." The crash, however, ended Gary's flying career. The man who had loved aviation since the 1970s could no longer set foot in an airplane. The physical scars were bad enough, but the emotional trauma ran even deeper. For years after the accident, he refused to board a plane. The very thought of flying filled him with panic. But over time, he began to heal. Slowly, carefully, he rebuilt his confidence. In 2018, 2 years after the accident, Gary attended the Air Venture Oshkosh Air Show Wisconsin. Surrounded by fellow aviation enthusiasts, he found the courage to step into a helicopter. His heart pounded with fear, but he did it. For the first time since the crash, he was back in the air. Gary Bennett's story is not just about a plane crash. It is about the sheer will to live, the kindness of strangers, and the strength of human spirit. On that August evening, a man fell from the sky in a ball of fire, landed in someone's backyard, and should have died. But he didn't. He survived, thanks to his own determination and the compassion of 2 strangers who chose to open their door instead of turning him away. His story reminds us how fragile life is, how quickly it can change, and how sometimes, even in the darkest moments, miracles do happen. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.